That's the way Google works. Okay, where did the cat go when it lost its tail? Anyone? I bet you there's some smarty pants in this room who can get this one. To the retail store. I used to be a banker, but then I lost interest. Two atoms are walking down the street and they run into each other. One says to the other, "Are you all right?" "No, I lost an electron." "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm positive." All right, let me find my actual script. You got it? I got it. Okay, you got it. Do you want me to start? So this afternoon session is the official sibling to yesterday's session. While yesterday we did a lot of required items at the beginning of the meeting, we don't need to be part of the official proceedings. Today we're going to be doing required items that do not need to be part of the official record. You'll notice, I hope, that you are now sitting in your table groups. It looks like you're sitting in your table groups. You'll be seeing a lot of these folks over the next week, and spending a lot of time together, so we certainly encourage you to get to know one another, introduce yourselves. I'd like to remind you that as we are dealing with items of business, they will be pinned to the top of the workbook, and we demonstrated that yesterday, how that's going to work out. You'll also be able to find them in their regular locations. All right, okay. We want to apologize for the lack of capacity around the listening sessions. They certainly were incredibly tight spaces and standing room only. I think there was, I think we underestimated how interested you were going to be in these listening sessions with the Festival of Faith going on. This won't be the case, or shouldn't be the case, for the rest of the listening sessions, so don't be discouraged. We've got a few announcements before we get started, and I'll hand it over to my sidekick, Ryan. Oh, and I'll give you back your phone.
I've been asked to share about the prayer room. The prayer room is in locker room 6. So it's behind the stage, down the hallway, under a stairwell. Go into that quiet place and pray. The purpose of the prayer room is to support the General Council, the Commissioners, and the United Church of Canada as they do this very important work at this critical time in the life of the Church. 3 things to know about the prayer room. There will be prayer cards like this on your tables in English and French, and when you fill one out, put it in one of the multicolored boxes around the room. I'm looking for these multicolored boxes. Somewhere there will be multicolored boxes. And those will be shared and included in evening prayers. The prayer room is open all day for personal prayer, but there's also 3 times of structured prayer: 7:30 in the morning for the early risers, 1:30 for those who sleep in, 7 p.m. for those who really sleep in. This week, each one of the 3,000+ ministries of the United Church of Canada, each person here, and each of our overseas guests will be named in structured prayer, and we hope that you can be present for at least some of those, or particularly at a time when a region or a group is named. Tonight, in particular, at the 7 p.m. time, they will be praying for the Indigenous ministries and the Indigenous Church and its leaders, and those people associated with a potential future Region 1, 2, and 3, as well as conference delegates to General Council.
Anyone who indicated on your registration that you did not bring a digital device, we have a laptop available for you at the IT help table in that back corner. You're one, are you? Okay, we'll see if somebody maybe can connect you. Please also let them know if you had indicated this, and they will, and if you do not require, if you indicated it but you actually don't need it, let us know that also, because there's a waiting list for digital devices. Our many thanks to the creators of the 4 directions pins in the table center containers. And the creators were Scott Maricel, Stephen Lindsay, Gail Miracle. Goodness, that's what happens when you're reading. Pardon my messing that up. Nita Miracle of the Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory. They are a gift to you from them. Another announcement, the Black ministers at Council are invited to meet together over supper on Monday, July 23rd. And now I think it's over to the moderator. Thank you.
Au nom de notre Seigneur Jésus-Christ, seul chef souverain de l'Église, et par l'autorité qui m'a été conférée par le 42e Conseil général 1015, I hereby declare this meeting of the 43rd General 2015 I hereby declare this meeting of the 43rd General Council 2018 to be in session for the work that may properly be brought before it to the glory of God. Welcome to everyone who is in the room and to all of you who are joining us online today. The miracle of technology is connecting us from coast to coast to coast. So thank you for tuning in. I have just a couple of quick announcements. Nominations for moderator close at 4:30 today. So just before that, I will be asking if there are any further nominations, and then at 4:30 I will close nominations. And then later today, we'll have an opportunity to meet all of our nominees, and then tomorrow we'll hear from them. But that's for later. Items for this session can be found in the unassigned section of your workbook. When each item is under discussion, as always, it will be pinned to the top of the proposals folder page. So you can look for it there. Remember, again, if you need help navigating the website, flag down a techie steward and they will help you out. So, we are going to begin with GS01, Opening and Procedural Emotions. So you will find that shortly on the screen, but it will be at the top of your workbook there digitally. So I'm going to turn it over now to our General Secretary to introduce GS01.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to introduce the opening and procedural motion. You will see it on the screen and it'll scroll through. This is something that you have seen in your workbooks, and it's simply the one that sets all the basic procedures and processes for this meeting, who has the different roles as corresponding members, as facilitation group, and all those different things. And of course, it began by defining the bounds of our meeting. And it then goes through and includes our agenda and our processes to be used this week. I'm sure all of you have been poring over this as you've examined the workbook. But we do like to see it just scrolled through so everybody's reminded of the different roles that people are playing and the processes that we're agreeing to in approving this opening and procedural motion. And once it is finished scrolling through, I would like to move the motion. So while we are waiting for that to finish scrolling,
the seconder for the motion, are they all Larry for this?
I think
so. Our seconder for motions will be Larry Doyle, the chair of the Planning Committee.
It's a long one, isn't it?
Wow. Hope you read it beforehand, folks.
And aren't you glad I'm not reading the whole thing to you? Yes, it's also where you receive all the reports that have come from different committees. So I would move it. And as the moderator said, I believe Larry Doyle is seconding it.
All right, friends. So you have our first motion before us. You've hopefully read that. It's moved. It's seconded. In a moment, we're going to be voting. This is one that we don't typically debate. But a question was raised, so I'm going to answer the question that was raised. The question was, what are the options we have when voting? And whenever we're voting on a motion, you can vote either in favor or opposed. If you wish to abstain and want to have your abstention recorded, then after the vote, you need to get yourself to one of the 3 microphones that you see on the floor here. One of the 4 microphones, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you don't go to this one. I'm not sure why this one's here. But 1, 2, 3, or 4, and flag, get my attention, and let me know that you wish to have your abstention recorded. Otherwise, you're voting in favor or opposed. So, can we have our voting slide? Now you're getting your clickers out. Remember your clickers that are attached to your name tag? Get them out. You got them in your hand. This is the real deal this time. This is not a test. When I say, not yet, but when I say vote now, then you are going to, if you are in favor of the procedural motions, you're going to click 1. If you are opposed, you're going to click 2. You got them out. You're going to have 20 seconds to do this. Please vote now. Okay, voting is closed. You are overwhelmingly in favor of the procedural motions. Now I have just a question you can answer with your murmurs. Was that enough time for you to vote? Fabulous, thank you. All right, our next I'm going to ask up Maggie Dieter and Norm Seeley, who are going to give us an introduction to AMC1/GCE1, the Caretakers Report, Calls to the Church, and they'll also just, you're going to do the AMC2 as well, kind of. They're giving us some background information that will cover both of those, and then we'll move to voting. So welcome, thank you.
So we just wanted to speak briefly in response to several conversations that I had yesterday. Actually, the same conversation I had several times yesterday. The calls to the church, why aren't we discussing them? Why aren't we debating them? Why aren't we, in our United Church way of loving things, amending them and changing them? And I think we need to understand the context. It's different than we might imagine. This relationship between the Indigenous church and the settler church is not marriage counseling. We're not tinkering with the relationship. The gift from the Indigenous church is, would you like to be in a relationship? This is who we are. Now you decide, are we in relationship? Have I got that about right, Meg?
You got that right, Norm. So I'm not going to go over the history. We know our history. We know for several decades the Indigenous leadership within the United Church of Canada has been working towards a vision of new beginnings, of new relationship. The Aboriginal Ministries Council has spoke of relationships of equity, respect, and mutuality. So the caretakers of our Indigenous circle for 2 years sat at the table and brought to bear their wisdom and their knowledge of history, their knowledge of the needs of our communities, and a desire to be in relationship with the whole church. To embrace the calls to the church is to embrace the ongoing ministry of reconciliation within our church, to continue to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. It's a solid pathway as we move forward in this time.
For me, this is an opportunity for this body to model for all of our communities, being good relations, developing a relationship. And it's the opportunity for all of our communities to model for the whole country how we move into new relationship, not imagine that we can fix an old one, but create something new.
Thank you, both. So, yesterday we heard from some of the caretakers and from leaders in our Indigenous church about the caretakers report, the calls to the church. You have it before you. You've had it for some time. I trust that you have read it. It's again on the screen, but just the motion. Because this one, the report is long and it's in depth, and it's important that it be read and understood by everyone in our church. So I trust you're also going to take that home. But the motion that we will have, and it will be moved and seconded, is that the 43rd General Council receive the report of the caretakers of our Indigenous circle, to discuss it and ensure that it's understood and embraced, and approve it for implementation. That's what we're going to be voting on. That we receive it, we commit to discussing it, understanding it, embracing it, and we approve it for implementation. And it's moved by Russ Burns. Do I have a seconder? Janet Sigurdsson. So it's moved, it's seconded. We're gonna vote on this. This one we're not discussing for the reasons that have been explained to us. So please get your clickers out. You're ready? If you're voting in favor, you're going to click 1. If you're opposed, you're clicking 2. Please vote now. That is overwhelmingly approved. So normally we don't clap after a vote. We let you clap that time. Now I'm telling you that we won't do it again. So we're going to move right into AMC2, which is implementation of the calls of the church. So we've just approved that we will implement the calls to the church. AMC2 is the evolving plan for implementing the calls to the church. This is the proposal that will get us going on that path, which is an ongoing path of implementing what it means to have embraced the calls to the church. So again, you have it in your workbook, and it will be coming up on your screen. Reads that the 43rd General Council receive with approval the calls to the church, and A, endorse and commit the United Church of Canada to the, is this a long one? Should I be reading this whole thing?
No.
No,
Really
you can read it.
But it's the process things because with the Caretakers report, you've approved very important principles, and there are many steps and consultations and conversations that will take place, including within the Indigenous community, before the final version of what, for example, the National Indigenous Body looks like, and that will go to the National Spiritual Gathering next summer. So there's work yet to be done, and this is the work that follows the principles that you've just approved.
I'm going to invite Russ and Janet to move and second this one as well. Is that? So moved by Russell Burns, Janeted by second Sigurdsson. Seconded by Janet Sigurdsson. Get your clickers out, folks. If you're in favor, you'll click 1. If you're opposed, you'll click 2. Please vote now. Again, overwhelmingly in favor. That is approved. Our next motion is GS2, Enacting Remits authorized by the 42nd General Council 2015. And I'm going to ask the General Secretary to just give us a little background on this one.
Thank you. And remembering that at each General Council, we're asked to enact remits if there have been remits in the previous year or 3 years. These remits, this is the final stage of approval of decisions that were made by General Council in Corner Brook 3 years ago, and that were then subsequently approved by the majority of pastoral charges across the country and the majority of presbyteries, and significant majorities. You have the numbers in your in the motion itself. And so what's left for this meeting is to decide whether or not to enact the remits. It isn't open to us through this process to change what would be in these, but simply to say yes or no to what has been approved at this time by General Council 42 and by the pastoral charges and presbyteries on remit. So I'm pleased to place this motion before you.
Thank you. Tech team, I think that was our practice slide.
Oh.
We had a little practice section for how we do voting and stuff, and we used this one as if it were. So that's okay. We're just going to get the actual wording.
I think it's
Minus the we recommend. This is... All right. Thank you. So, GS2, Enacting Remits authorized by the 42nd General Council 2015. That the 43rd General Council enact the following remits authorized by the 42nd General Council 2015, all of which have been approved by a majority of presbyteries and pastoral charges. Those are remits 1, 2, 3, and 4, or a majority of the presbyteries, remits 5, 7, and 8. And then you have what each of those remit numbers are. Almost fits on the screen there. Great. Moved by Nora Sanders, seconded by Larry Doyle. So we have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded, and I see somebody at microphone 2.
Paul Reed, Bay of Quinte Conference. This is not just a mere formality. This is a significant piece of the work that we are doing at this General Council. We have committed to a process that includes listening and discussion, and we have not had that opportunity. I would like to move that this be postponed definitely to allow us to have 10 minutes of discussion within our table groups, that we might consider such matters as to whether these should be dealt with seriatim, or whether indeed there is any further discussion and wisdom on the enacting of these remits.
All right. Thank you, Paul. So there's a request that we take 10 minutes of discussion time. And I have a proposal for us, because my watch just beeped at me, which means that it is 28 minutes after 4, which means that nominations for moderator close in 2 minutes. So I'm going to invite us to take just a moment, pause this conversation, and I am going to ask. We have received no notice of any further nominations for moderator. We have 10 nominees already, but you've got a minute and a half left. If there are any nominations from the floor for moderator, please make your way to a microphone right now. I don't see anybody heading that way, so I declare nominations for moderator closed. Now, back to business, the other business. The request is for some table time to just talk about the implementation, the proposal that's before us, which is enacting the remits authorized by the 42nd General Council 2015. So that seems like a really good way forward to give this really the time and consideration that it deserves. So you have 10 minutes in your table groups. Now I realize you haven't really spent the time getting to know one another, but consider this an opportunity to get to know one another's hearts. 10 minutes to just discuss this in your groups. Oh, there it is. Sorry, you have 1 minute left in your groups. All right, friends, thank you so much for that fulsome discussion. And thank you for the suggestion that we have that discussion. This is a really significant moment in the life of our church, and it deserves the time and the attention that you have given to it, so thank you. We have a proposal that we have a motion that has been moved and seconded. So unless I see somebody moving to the mic suggesting an alternative, I'm going to shortly call the question. And I'm not seeing anybody moving to the microphones. Yes, I am. Microphone 1.
So what happened to the request to vote on them seriatim?
Well, it was discussed. Hopefully, you were discussing. There wasn't a request. There was a request for time to discuss to see if that might emerge.
I would move that, my name is Penny Nelson from Maritime Conference. I would move that we vote on each of these remits in seriatim.
Okay, and we need 2 people to request that for it to happen. Is that hand up meaning, okay. So we will deal with the 8 parts of this motion seriatim, which means we will vote remit by remit. So our first vote will be on remit 1, the 3-council model. So the motion before us, which is moved and seconded by Nora Sanders and Larry Doyle, that the 43rd General Council enact remit 1, 3-council model. So get your clickers ready, folks. You're just voting on whether or not to enact remit 1. I'm hearing discussion. Okay. Okay, business table is saying, moderator, discuss this. So if there is any discussion on the motion that is before us, please move to a microphone and we will have that now. I recognize microphone 4.
Hi, Kathy Yamashita from Alberta and Northwest Conference. People from Table 38 had attended the governance listening session and said something about denominational council executive not having enough room for a representative from each of the new regions. I just wonder, is that an issue that's included in this motion?
I'm going to ask the General Secretary to respond.
Yes, because General Council, and therefore it was in the remit, set a fixed number of people on the executive. And that was before we knew how many regions. There are proposals to be considered later this week that would increase the size of the executive. Because the number was in a remit, that proposal, if approved, would need to go to remit. Presumably, though, if it were approved, then someone else could be invited as a corresponding member for this time. That could be decided. But the decision to change the number can't be made at this General Council because the remit process has approved a different number.
Thanks, Nora.
Thank you.
Microphone 1.
The discussion at our table 28 was around this same basic issue, and what we're hoping to do is to actually carve out the approval of Remit 1 to provide for some additional dialogue and learning around the issue so that we can be comfortable with the representation at denominational council. I'm not sure how this fits with the current vote in front of us.
So I'm not 100% clear on what you're...
Basically what I'm saying is that we would not proceed with a vote on Remit 1 until we've had opportunity to have further learning and dialogue about it. We'd vote on the other remits.
Okay, so you're asking if the vote for this motion, which is the enactment of Remit 1, could be postponed definitely, and to give the court time to discuss the implications of the size of the executive and the regional representation issue.
Yes.
So is that are you moving that?
I so move.
So now we have a motion. Help me.
Elizabeth Morrison, Maritime Conference.
Thank you very much. And I am very new to this. So I'm just going to get a little advice on, because I know we have a motion on the floor, and so I need to find out what we do with a motion on this. We can do this. Okay, so we have a motion. I would need a seconder for the motion to postpone definitely. Can you go to a microphone, please, and tell us your name and conference?
Richard Choi from Toronto Conference.
Richard, I missed your last name. I'm sorry. Actually, both of you, if you can just go to the business table and make sure that they have your names and conference correctly. But we have now a motion to postpone definitely the decision on Remit 1. So that is now the motion that we are discussing. Do we discuss it or we just vote on it? I guess we're discussing that. So if you're at a microphone now, I hope you're only speaking to the motion to postpone. So microphone 3, I saw you first.
Yeah, my name is Danny Button, and I'm from the Newfoundland Conference. I'd like to speak against that motion. We have been 3 years now in the process of doing remits. They're not perfect. Nothing is perfect. So there needs to be some changes, obviously, as we discussed regarding the representation, but there's a process for that as well. The process is another remit. And we're not scared of remits. We've had 3 years of remits, so what's the big deal? So I think we should be against that motion, personally, and we should get ahead and move ahead of the church, because otherwise we're just going backwards. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And then microphone 4, and then I'll come to 2.
Gordon Roberts from Manitou Conference. The motion is to postpone definitely, but I asked the question, postpone definitely till when?
Yes, thank you. To later in this meeting. It's to give us time at this meeting to have more discussion about the implications of the size of the executive and the question around representation. We would deal with it before we leave here on Friday. Microphone 2.
Murray Spear from Alberta Northwest Conference. Madam Moderator, I would invite all of the commissioners to consider whether they are really thinking about defeating Remit 1 over the issue of having only 18 people on the denominational executive. If you are thinking of defeating Remit 1 over that issue, then we need to talk about it. If you are thinking about needing to understand all of the implications, we can't change the remit. All we can do is vote yes or no. My encouragement is that we vote now. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Erin Todd from Manitou Conference. This question may already have been answered, but I just want it to be really clear for me and maybe for others. We can vote, it's possible for us to vote now, enact Remit 1 if that's the will of the court, also potentially accept proposal, Manitou's proposal and Newfoundland's proposal regarding representation from the regional councils. We can do both those things?
You can do both those things, but the second thing wouldn't take effect until there'd been another remit, so for another 3 years. And there might be a provision to do something by way of corresponding members in the meantime. That could be left for the executive to sort out. But the motion to change what's been approved in the remit would need to go through another remit.
So, great. So we don't need to necessarily get totally hung up on this denominational executive thing in order to press kind of the rest of remit, what's in Remit 1.
You still do have a proposal coming later in the week to do with the size of the executive.
Both those things are possible.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Microphone 3.
Hello. A question of clarification.
Sorry. Can we have your name and conference, please?
I'm Jason O'Hearn from Maritime Conference. And a question of clarification. Right now, for voting on Remit 1, is that just saying we will go to communities of faith, regional council, and denominational council, or does that include we go to that with 18 or whatever people on the denominational council?
It includes that, Jason, because that was in the remit material.
Okay.
Yeah, the background material for it, so, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Remit. Microphone 4.
Joyce Payne, London Conference. I speak against the motion. We've had 6 to 9 years of work and study and prayer and discernment. Our General Secretary has already shown us a way forward around concerns around numbers on denominational council. So I would urge this court to uphold the decisions of our other courts and vote.
Right. So I see nobody else at microphones. I'm hearing a call for the question. So if we could have the wording up here, the motion we are voting on right now is the motion to postpone definitely to later in this meeting the vote on to enact Remit 1. So if you are in favor of postponing until later in the meeting, then you would click 1. If you are opposed and you want us to vote on enacting Remit 1 now, then you would click 2. So can we have our little in favor and opposed? Everybody clear? Super. Please vote now. Okay, so the motion to postpone is defeated, which means we now have before us the motion to enact Remit 1. So we are now discussing the motion to enact Remit 1 3-council model. I don't see anybody at microphones, so I'm going to invite you to get your clickers out. You're now voting on whether you are in favor or opposed to approving Remit 1. Please vote now. And that is approved. Our next motion is regarding Remit 2. So the motion before us is to enact Remit 2, which is the elimination of transfer and settlement. So is there any discussion on this motion? I don't see anybody heading for a microphone. You ready for the question? All right. Please vote on the approval of Remit 2 now. And Remit 2, the enactment is approved. Next motion is the enactment of Remit 3, Office of Vocation. Is there any discussion? All right, then I'm going to ask you to get your clickers out and vote in favor or opposed to the enactment of Remit 3 now. And Remit 3 is approved. Our next one is Remit 4, funding a new model. Any discussion? Are you heading to a microphone? Or you? Nope. Okay. All right then. Then let's move to the vote on this. Please vote in favor or opposed to approving Remit 4. And Remit 4 is approved. Our next motion is to approve Remit 5, which is mutual recognition of ministries. Any discussion? All right, then we will move to the vote. Please vote on the approval of Remit 5 now. Remit 5 is approved. Our next one is Remit 7, which is candidacy pathway. Any discussion? All right, I think we're ready to vote. So on Remit 7, candidacy pathway, please vote now. Remit 7 is approved. And finally, Remit 8, toward a new model of membership. Any discussion? All right. Then we will vote now on Remit 8. And Remit 8 is approved. Friends, we have just approved the enactment of all of the remits that were approved by the wider church. I'd like us to take just a moment to offer prayer. Let us pray. Holy, disturbing, grace-filled God, this has been such a long, sometimes difficult, often joyful and exciting journey for us as we wrestle with the changes that are going on around us and within us as a church, and how to respond faithfully. We thank you that even in the midst of our fears and anxieties and uncertainties, that you have accompanied us, as you always do, that you have granted us courage to act even in the presence of our fears, to respond with faith and hope even when we are uncertain of what the future will entail, that you have taught us how to walk together in courageous, hope-filled footsteps. May we have the strength and the vision to live into these changes, to live into this new structure joyfully, with creativity, knowing that we are always and forever a work in progress. We give you thanks that you are always and forever working with and through and around us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, friends. We have one more motion in this section, I think. GS3, our consent motion. I'm going to ask the General Secretary to present it.
So we placed in consent matters that seem to be more technical, less needing discussion, less likely to be controversial. And they will scroll through, and I'd like you to look especially in that right-hand column, because it'll tell you if there's been anything changed. In a couple of them, there was some tidying up wording based on feedback received, and I want to note particularly in the one, and as we scroll through, I'm going to say, when it gets to the one of the mandate of the Nominations Committee, there's been clarification to make sure that they're aware in their mandate of the importance of the Francophone portion of our church as they make their decisions. So that's, I'd say, the most notable adjustment in what you have before you. This has been in your workbook for some time, and I'd like to move that this group of proposals be approved en masse in our consent motion. Some of them also have to do with the details of beginning to implement the decisions that you've just made. And I believe Larry is seconding this one too. Oops, that was fast. All
right. All of these, remember, are in the workbook, and because we don't discuss these on the floor, the consent motion, we trust you've read them ahead of time. We would entertain if somebody wants to pull something from consent, but we don't discuss what is in consent. So I see somebody at microphone, Paul at microphone 1.
Paul Douglas, Walpole Intercultural Observer, also from Alberta Northwest Conference. Just a point of request, Madam Moderator. The previous motions of the Council would have affected the lives of individuals, their livelihood. I wonder, Madam Moderator, as your intercultural observer, if the Council should not place on record its thanks to those who, because of the motion, may not be in a job come January. We are dealing with people's lives. We must thank them for their work.
Thank you, Paul. Yes. It's true, if people understand what Paul is referring to, some of the executive secretaries of what are now conferences, but after this remit, we won't have conferences, and not all of the current executive secretaries will be executive ministers. And other staff, many of the conference staff, at this point may not even know whether or not they're going to have a job in the new regional structure, and yet have worked tirelessly at helping to prepare the conferences and presbyteries and our church to move into this regional model, which may or may not even have a job for them. And that is a heroic task. And we thank you and we acknowledge the sacrifice that you have made and are making. So thank you. So I see somebody at microphone 2.
Thank you. Daniel McDonald, Bay of Quinte Conference. That screen scrolled by pretty quick. I just want to clarify that GCE08 is indeed in the consent docket. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. I would therefore move, and seconded by Penny Nelson, that we lift GCE08 from the consent docket and place it into the remit implementation theme. There's been lots of conversation and concern from myself and from others that I've spoken to that GCE08, which deals with revisions to the basis of union, there are some wording concerns and language concerns and even some possible theological concerns in the revisions that are proposed in that motion or proposal. So I think by lifting it from the consent docket and placing it in the remit implementation theme, that would give us a chance to have that listening and discussion time before we actually vote on that.
Okay, so we have a request to, or a motion to remove GCE08?
Yes.
From the consent docket. So we need a majority of commissioners to approve lifting something from consent. So we now have this motion that we're going to deal with before we deal with the consent motion, because we need to know if we're leaving this in or out. So do folks need the wording of GCE08 so you know what is being proposed to be lifted? GCE08 is 15 pages? Okay, so you've got it in your docket.
But I think it, by title, is Basis of Union Revised Polity, Ministry Personnel and Administration Sections. So it's just so people know what the content is, it's a lot of those details.
Madam Moderator, could I speak to that once more?
Please.
I was told, Cynthia Gunn did approach me when I was considering lifting this out. And she did tell me I didn't need to, at this time, enumerate all the various kind of sections, because I recognize it as a big document. But again, I would just emphasize that the concerns that I have been made aware of and that I myself have, I think are significant enough and numerous enough that it would be helpful to have that discussion time. And then if we did place it into the Remit implementation theme, during our discussion session of that theme would be when we can enumerate those language pieces.
Okay, thank you. So that is the motion that we have before us. It's moved and seconded that GC08 be lifted from the consent docket and placed in the Remit implementation theme to be discussed there, along with the other proposals in that theme. Is there any, do we just vote on that? We don't discuss that particularly? So we're just going to vote on whether or not to lift it. So get your clickers out. Yeah. So your vote, yes, if you want to lift it, you're going to click 1. And if you want to leave it in the consent docket, you're going to click 2. So go ahead and vote now, please. So you are in favor of lifting this one out. So GCE08 will be lifted from consent. So now we're back to the consent minus GCE08. And I saw somebody at microphone 4, and then we'll go to 3. So Steve?
Moderator, Steve Barabay, Maritime Conference. To me, it's always interesting that we have international guests who bless us with their presence here. We're going through a very different process this year, and I really respect the work of the committee in terms of trying to prioritize some of our work. But this morning, we heard Miriam Spies talk about how her ministry was shaped and formed as a result of a visit to Palestine, one of our partners, who former moderator David Giuliano also spoke of. We all know of some of the situations that we're facing in terms of Korea, these priorities that keep cropping up. We have international partners here, and sometimes they need to know that we stand in solidarity with them, even though I would hope that the proposals that deal with these two international issues, which are MTU 02, Toronto 03, and Toronto 07, might be considered slam dunks because they're social justice. But I think it would be important, and therefore I would move that we remove these from the consent agenda.
Okay.
Steve, I think that you're talking about another motion that has to do with the prioritized and non-prioritized. Right now, we're on the ones that are going to be approved in consent. After that, there would be a motion to have the matters that weren't identified as priority by the commissioners referred to the executive, okay?
Gee, thanks, Nora, and I can put aside that speech for later. We can just, we probably have the technology to replay it, don't we?
But thank you. Keep in mind what you've heard, because I suspect it's going to come back. Thanks, Steve. Microphone 3.
Thank you. Sandra Nixon, BC Conference. I'd like to move that we remove GCE 09 from the consent docket and place it into the Remit implementation theme. I have heard some concerns around how the candidacy boards will be populated, and I would like the court to have some discussion on that.
Okay.
I don't have a seconder at the moment.
Okay, so is there a seconder for the motion to lift GCE 09 and place it also in the implementation of the Remit? Paul. I said Paul Reed, sorry, Bay of Quinte Conference. All right, so we have a mover and a seconder to lift GCE 09 and place it in the theme for the remit implementation. Did you want to say a word of rationale around that? Or?
I'll just add, so the concern, at least one of the concerns I've heard in some conversations is around the nomination of 5 people from each presbytery to be in the pool, and then after the Board of Vocation is selected, that the rest would be part of a pool to populate the candidacy boards. There's some concern around numbers, how many people would be needed on each candidacy board, whether there'd be enough from that pool, and also just in, maybe talking about some intentionality around ensuring continuity for students, candidates who are already in process, that we have some people continuing optimally, and I don't see any provision or addressing of that concern.
All right, okay. So we have a motion to lift. We're going to vote on the motion to lift. So again, if you would like to see GCE 09 lifted out of consent and placed to be discussed with other remit implementation issues in that theme, then you would vote in favor. If you want to leave it in consent, then you would vote opposed. So please vote now. All right, that is defeated. So
Moderator, mic number 4.
Sorry.
Bob Fillier, BC Conference. At least over here, there was lots of rumbling that we weren't getting confirmation that our vote was being recorded.
Yes, here too.
Oh, well then. Okay, so maybe the clickers had a bad moment there. So can we redo that vote? All right, our team is doing a little techie check. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. And oh, this is a great opportunity for me to tell you something I learned. There are 4 floor mics, and then there is this unlabeled mic up here. And the unlabeled mic is the mic that is for points of order. So if there's like that one, like, whoa, hold the phone, like we have to interrupt this scheduled program for an important announcement about something to do with something being out of order in the business. You go to this mic right in front of me with no number on, it's always on. The other ones are typically not on unless I recognize you at them to speak. So thank you for figuring out how to get my attention anyway. But that's what this little mic is here for, and it's going to be used.
Hi there, Mark Arnell, Bay of Quinte Conference. Could we just have some instruction to the floor to verify that their vote went through? Because there's been a number of times where I've had to push a few times, and the channel thing crossed out has come up, but then it did go through. So you do, pressing it once sometimes isn't doing it. You can verify that it went.
You're saying you have to press it multiple times to verify that it went?
I'm saying you have to watch to make sure it goes through. Because I've had to press it multiple times to make sure it went.
Right. So if you want to know whether or not your vote actually went through, you have to look at the clicker when you're clicking it, and if a little green light comes on, it means your vote was registered. If the little green light doesn't come on, then click again, maybe a little harder, and say a little prayer as you do it. When that green light comes on, then you can rest assured that your vote was registered. And our tech team is figuring out what happened with that last one now. Can we do it now? We can do that. Okay, all right. So there's enough concern that that didn't necessarily get registered. So get your clicker out and look at it. And remember, if you want to vote to lift GCE 09 out of consent, you're going to click on number 1, and if you want to leave it in consent, you're going to click on number 2. Watch as you click and look for that green light. Please vote now.
Okay, the question I had, it's just something I noticed. When I had my hand over top of this, it didn't seem to work right. When I moved my hand, it worked better. Am I imagining things, or is that actually the case?
Don't know.
Okay, that's for the tech team.
Yep. So keep your hand off the top of it and see if it works better. But please vote now. I know, vote it, yeah, because I didn't see the numbers go by. If you don't see the little countdown, then it's not really happening. No, vote now. There you go. Wow. All right. So that still was defeated. And it looked like people did vote. We had the right number of people voting. Aha. We're getting the word from the table that yes, all of your votes were included there. All right, so that means that the GC E09 stays in consent, and we have the consent motion before us still. So I'm not seeing anybody else at a microphone asking to lift anything else, and so the motion, the consent motion as you have it before you with only GC E08 lifted is now before us to vote on. So if you want to vote in favor of consent, please press 1. Opposed is 2. Please vote now. And that passes. All right, well now we have a fun little thing that's going to happen. From time to time throughout the week, we're going to take a little break from the other business of the council to hear directly from you about things that you feel that we should be aware of. And Alan talked about this yesterday. This is our Speak Out session. So each Speak Out session is going to have a few minutes to it. And during that time, we invite people to make their way to one of the floor microphones, and you will have, when I acknowledge you, 1 minute, no more, to share with the court something you feel that we should all hear about. Your microphone will be turned off after that minute, and we will move to the next person. So part of the excitement of this is like, can you get it in 1 minute? I realize that for some folks that's, you know, harder than for others. And I am going to use my executive privilege to say that for some people for whom speaking itself is a particular challenge, I'm going to use my discretion to say they get more than a minute. But the rest of yes, the rest of us have 1 minute. So in this particular time, we have a total of 6 minutes. So if somebody speaks for less than a minute, then maybe we'll get 7 people in. But if all 6 speak for a minute, then that's it. Bada bing, bada boom, we're done. So normally, make your way to the microphone now if you want to be part of the Speak Out first 6 people who get there. At other times, I'm going to give you a little more of a heads up that this is happening so that folks who move a little slower will have more lead time to get there. And I know, because You are the church. That if you're somebody who moves faster, but you see somebody who moves slower heading for a microphone, that you will slow down and let them get ahead of you, because that's just what we do. But right now we got 5 up there, so that's great. And I'm going to start with microphone 1. You got 1. There's a little timer. There's a little timer. So keep your eye on it. It tells you how many seconds you got left. Microphone 1, over to you.
Nick Phillips, Maritime Conference. I'm also the chair of a network of clergy called Cruciffusion, or Cruxiffusion. We are people who are passionate about Jesus. And there's a number of us here, and I just want to quickly share that we will have dinner together in the meal hall, sitting somewhere in the middle where we can find a few tables. Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, that was Speedy Gonzalez. So, microphone 4. Oh, sorry, 3. You sat down. 3.
Hello, Jason O'Hearn, Maritime Conference. A lot of you noticed a lot of Maritime Conference commissioners have been wearing orange shirts today with a saying on the back, "We got this." Clarification, that originated from the youth at Maritime Conference. On our last night of worship to Maritime Conference, we gathered around a circle, we sang very nice songs and everything, and each youth presented a candle to a delegate, battery operated, and said, "We got this," because in the midst of scariness of new models, the youth are here, and we are not the future of the church, but we are the now, and we wanted to reassure that.
All right, thank you. Microphone 4.
Hi, my name is Brenna Baker. I'm from Hamilton Conference, and I want to invite you all to the Skylight Festival, which is happening this upcoming weekend in Paris, Ontario at 5 Oaks, a beautiful education and retreat center. Skylight is in its 4th year. It's a weekend full of faith, arts, and justice. It's a lot of United Church people, but a lot of people from other traditions as well, so it's great to meet them and hear about what's going on all over Canada, all over North America. There'll be amazing artists, amazing musicians, great workshops. It's a really inspiring time. You can camp for free, and there's also spaces to stay at 5 Oaks. There will be things like swimming and hiking and river rafting if you want to do that. If you're not from this area, I can help you get to Paris. I would love to help you get to Paris. There's day rates, there's...
Oh, okay. They're timing. The timer will show up eventually. Microphone 4 again.
Rick Matheson, finance staff at the General Counsel office, and I would have given her a few more seconds for the Skylight Festival, but I guess you didn't know that. Last Monday, a very, very important historic legal ruling came out, and most people here may have read about it in the paper or heard about it through the social justice networks, but the whole political activity, nonpartisan political activity, calling for justice, advocating for peace, advocating for reduction of poverty, a court ruling came out basically throwing out that rule for charities, meaning that we can be more active. And it's a fabulous ruling, still potentially subject to appeal, but we don't think that'll happen, and we'll certainly be arguing that it not happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
David King, Bay of Quinte Conference. My paternal grandmother is joining us possibly via the internet, and I want to shout out to her. She is 100 years young today. Love you, Grandma.
Nice. Microphone 4.
Barry Reeder, Toronto Conference. I work in the Jane Finch community, and I just want to get the record straight. Although the community suffers from racialized poverty, you don't need to wear a Teflon vest to come visit us.
All right, thank you. You guys are really good at this speak out. That's awesome. And you didn't even take the whole 6 minutes, so I'm just going to say this. For future ones, we will make sure that there's more time for you to get to a microphone, and if you're speaking in a language that is not your first language, or if speaking is something that takes a little longer for you, please don't let that stop you from being part of a speak out. There is space for you too. We will accommodate that. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alan Buckingham to present the next item of business.
Thank you, Moderator. The next item of business is GC4301, non-prioritized proposals. So one of the goals of the Planning Committee was to have as many people discussing and making decisions on things as possible. So rather than us having break into commissions where some of us decide for all of us, we asked you to prioritize the work of the council beforehand. Like most systems, we recognize that this one isn't perfect either, but 243, or about 2/3 of you, were willing and able to take part in the prioritization process. 10 themes were selected, and the proposals from the unprioritized themes led to us having the 16 proposals listed in GC4301, which you will be able to see on your screen, and find pinned to the top of the proposals section of the workbook. Now, even if this motion is passed, that doesn't mean you'll have no say on any of these matters. Friday, if there is time, we will be led in table conversations that will include some time to provide feedback to the executive regarding these proposals, and you'll also be sent a survey for individual feedback. Even with all that, there is the process to remove the items, and it's the same one that was used for removing from the consent motion. So you are encouraged to, if you wish to remove items from this or a full theme, to suggest what you would like to replace from the themes that were prioritized so that we have an adequate amount of time, which is still not adequate, I recognize, a better amount of time to discuss these things. So that's, with that, Nora Sanders will move and Larry Doyle will second GC4301.
So you have that motion before you. Again, it's in your workbook. It's a longish one. It's, Steve, there you are. I knew you'd be there. So, Steve, the process is that if you would like to lift something out of here and have it discussed by the whole court, then you have 1 minute to make that request and your rationale for that request. But we also then need you to indicate which piece of the business that you want to have removed from the agenda to make time to discuss this item, because the agenda has been built, like we can't just add items. We have to replace items. So we need you to give us in 1 minute what your rationale for including this one is and which one you want to see lifted out that this one would replace. And then if, after that, then we will vote, and if a majority of the court is in favor of making that change, we will amend the motion accordingly. So, microphone 4.
Steve Barabay, Maritime Conference, yada, yada, yada. You've already heard from me in terms of things. But in terms of this process, this is a new process. And as has already been said, there are flaws. In terms of the reality of asking me to decide what should be removed, that's really an unfair request, I feel, at this point in time. So I would still ask that those 3 proposals be lifted from the agenda, or be removed from the consent agenda: MTU 02, Toronto 03, and Toronto 07. Statistically, there was very little difference between what came in at number 10 and the advocacy proposals. And I'm not asking for all of the advocacy proposals to be lifted. I'm asking for these 3, which relate to our international brothers and sisters, who I believe really need to hear from us. And that is seconded by my friend and colleague, Sean Hancock.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded that we would be adding in just those 3, Hamilton, Ham 03? No. Sorry, can you, could you name again the 3 that you want to have included?
Sure, I'm pushing for the most times at the mic, I think. MTU 02, Toronto 03, and Toronto 07. MTU 02 and Toronto 03 both deal with peace in the Korean Peninsula, and Toronto 07 is the proposal dealing with the request for costly solidarity from our Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Thank you. So I have been advised by Business Table that it's true you don't have to say what would be replaced. What you do need to know is that something will have to be replaced. So you're invited to suggest what might be replaced, or do as Steve has done and say, I don't know, but this is important enough, I want to make sure it gets onto the agenda. Know then that the business team will have to rejig the agenda, and something that was prioritized will have to be bumped off if we say these three should get priority. So, and that will be the work of the business table. Are you, I just want to check with 2 and 4. Are you wanting to discuss the motion that is currently in front of us? Okay, thank you. 2 and then 4, please.
Murray Spear from Alberta Northwest. I'm a first-time commissioner, and I would like some clarification about what has happened in the past in terms of how much business has ended up being referred and not considered by the full court at previous general council meetings.
So I can explain a little bit, but also to say that we're doing it a different way this time. So in the past, some of the work has gone to commissions, and so 1/3 of the people would make the decision on certain topics and the full plenary never deal with them. We decided not to do that this time, and so with Alan Buckingham's leadership as business chair, the plenary and the people in this room are dealing with everything, but through the process of the learning sessions or listening sessions and then the discussion times and then bringing it back to plenary. So typically, and so one of the changes in that new process was to say, rather than try to deal with everything at this meeting, find out what commissioners really want to deal with and ask the executive to follow up with the rest. So typically there's been a little bit referred on from the executive to the executive, but not a lot of matters. But we'd never asked that question before to commissioners of how do you most want to use your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Barry Reeder from Toronto Conference. I would like to lift Toronto 06.
Oh, sorry, we need to deal with the previous motion and then we can entertain.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
Yep, no problem. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to the motion, which is to lift MTU 02, TOR 3, and TOR 7? Microphone 4.
Susan Eagle, Toronto Conference. As one of the conferences that has a motion that is in this group, I want to speak in favor of the motion to lift those. When we work at conference to send resolutions forward to General Council, it is our hope and intention from the work that we have done that they will be given careful consideration on the floor. I understand the pressure of time with the business committee trying to figure out how to do that, but I would rather than replace existing business, I would rather that we squeeze things in. It is not unusual at a general council that sometimes we stay 15 minutes longer in a plenary session so that we can accommodate and honor the work that has been done by our conferences so carefully in sending these matters forward. So I'd speak in favor of this being lifted.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to this motion? Microphone 4.
Mel Stenson, Toronto Conference. I speak in favor of this motion.
Okay, so thank you. And just for clarity, if you want to speak to something, then we're hoping that you're going to add something that hasn't already been said. So you don't always have to come up to just say I speak for or against, but to let us know what it is that we haven't yet heard that you think we need to hear, either for or against this motion. So thank you for that. Microphone 2.
All right. Nevin Forsyth, Conference, Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario. I apologize deeply if I sound disrespectful in any way, shape, or form. These proposals, I'm not in favor of this. These proposals are incredibly important. I am in wholehearted agreement with them. However, as has been mentioned, these are slam dunks. As much as it would be fantastic to have an entire meeting, this massive gathering, affirm our support for these issues, there are issues then that we would not be able to talk about that require the discussion and the debate that these, again, called slam dunks, would then be occupying. So I would like people, as we vote to this, to consider the amount of time that we have and the importance of all of the other proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Steve, so Steve, you're moving this, so when you speak, it's closed. Okay.
I may have said that these are slam dunks, but they may not be. It's important for us as a court to talk about what it is in the world that we are concerned with, and not just what it is that we are concerned with in our own backyard. That is who we are. We've risked our faith. We dared throughout our history to address issues of not just concern to us, but of concern to our brothers and sisters who do not necessarily have a voice here. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call the question now. So the motion before us is that the following three proposals, MTU 2, TOR 3, and TOR 7, be removed from GC 4301, and that we find space on the agenda to deal with them. Recognizing it might mean that some things either get less time to discuss or that some other items will not be discussed that had been previously prioritized, and the business team will have to work that out. So that's the motion. Please get your clickers ready. And if you're voting in favor, you'll press 1. Opposed, press 2. Please vote now. Okay, so that motion is defeated. So those three will stay in the docket for GC 4301. So now we're still discussing GC 4301, which has been moved and seconded. And we're still on that one, and I believe we were at microphone 4.
Barry Reeder, Toronto Conference. I'd like to have it remove Toronto 06 that deals with the pension. I'm quite concerned that for 9 years, people on pensions within our, not only clergy, but also other staff that haven't had an increase in their pension amounts. So what they retired on 9 years ago is the same amount today, and it doesn't look like that will change. I think it's just that we're asking for some movement on that. We're not asking to fix the problem, but we're asking to investigate and see what other people say. And I think it's a very important, in order to do duty to those that are retired, to deal with this council.
Okay, so Barry is moving that. Do you have a seconder?
I don't. I do. Several.
We need a name and conference.
Penny Culverson from Bay of Quinte.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is that Toronto 7 be removed from the GC 4301 docket, and that space be found on the 6, sorry. TOR 6 be removed and space be found on the agenda. Any discussion on this motion? Microphone 1 and 4, are you speaking to the motion to remove TOR 6? Microphone 4? No? All right, I don't. Yes, I do. Microphone 4.
Stuart Oppenheimer from BC Conference. I'm the author of a BC motion about pensions, BC 02. And I just want to be sure that the church knows that even though our pension board has done an amazing job along with the General Council Executive of keeping the pension plan solvent and able to meet its obligations, many pensioners are in crisis because we have, I'm not a pensioner yet, but because so much of the value of the plan has decreased. Yeah, like it's worth 15% less than it was 8 years ago. And that will just continue. So we're looking for creative solutions, maybe even outside the pension plan, that could help to provide supplemental income in cases of dire need.
Okay, and I want to be clear that right now we're not actually debating the merits of the proposals themselves. We want to speak only to whether the merits of lifting them out of GC4301. If we do that, then there'll be an opportunity at this meeting to discuss them. If we don't do that, they will be discussed by the General Council Executive. But we're not actually debating the motions themselves or the proposals themselves. So thank you for that. Microphone 4.
Norm Sealight from Toronto Conference, and with the utmost respect for all of the issues raised, all the proposals coming forward, it was decided we needed fulsome discussion, not 1/3 of the courts. And so we asked for prioritization. And we went through a process. And we didn't say because you didn't make the top 10, it isn't important. And as the moderator just emphasized, this doesn't mean there's no action on these. It just means that they're not going to come before this court today. But there will be action. And therefore, I am opposed at this point to changing the priorities.
Okay, thank you. And I've been informed that we didn't catch entirely, the business table didn't catch entirely the name of the seconder. So Barry, if you could make sure that they get, or you can get, the seconder could get up herself and let them know, but we need that name for the minutes.
The first name is Penny. The last name I will spell, C-U-L-V-E-R-S-O-N, from Bay of Quinte.
Thank you. Is there any further? Okay, you're not interested. Okay, so I see nobody else at the mics wanting to speak to the motion that is before us, that Toronto 6 be removed from the GC4301 docket. So I'm going to invite you to get those clickers out, and you are voting either in favor of removing TOR 6 and placing it elsewhere in our agenda, or opposed and leaving it in the GC4301 docket. Please vote now. Okay, so that is also defeated. So we're back to GC4301, which is the motion to refer all of the unprioritized items to the General Council Executive. Microphone 4.
Madam Moderator, David Patterson from M&O Conference. I would like to lift BC 08, which is the document concerning the pipeline between Alberta and BC. This is, you are all here as Canadians now owner of that pipeline. And we should be discussing what should or should not be done with this. And I think it's pertinent that we discuss this now. The General Council may not get to this for a few years. And this is happening now. I think there is some possible solutions, but we need to discuss it, and I'm asking for someone to second this so that we can actually have an open discussion about the pros and cons for this particular project that you own.
Okay, so that's a motion to lift BC 08 from the GC 4301 docket, and we have a seconder?
Erica McNeely from BC Conference.
Sorry, I'm going to think you're going to need to say that slower and louder so that we can get it.
Erica McNeely from BC Conference.
Could you please spell your last name for...
M small c capital N E I L L Y.
Thank you. All right, so you have that motion to lift BC 08. Microphone 1, or nope, okay, microphone 3, are you speaking to that motion?
Yes, I am. Sandra Nixon, BC Conference. The concern I see with lifting any item and adding it to our agenda, as you've previously mentioned, something else might have to be taken out of the agenda. My concern would be that either the scenario is that something that has already been prioritized will be taken off, or this will, some of these things will be added on, but we won't have room to give them due consideration because we won't have room either for a listening session or table group discussions. And so my concern would be putting something that does require a lot of discussion, that hasn't been prioritized, onto the agenda, won't give it due, like we won't be able to do justice to it if we can't add it into our table group discussion time. So I think I'm not in favor of the motion, but really just expressing this concern unless there were there's some other wisdom in the court around exactly how that would fall out. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody at a microphone wishing to speak to this motion, so I'm going to call the question. Clickers out. I think you know the drill on this one now. If you want to lift BC 08 out of the docket and place it somewhere else on our agenda, you'll press 1. If you want to leave it where it is, then press 2. Please vote now. Okay, so that is defeated. Back to GC4301, microphone 1.
Thank you, moderator. I've wrestled with this, but I would like to move that we lift Hamilton 2 from this document. My name is Dave Pollard. I come from Alberta Northwest Conference, and sometimes I preach to up to 9 retired clergy on a Sunday. I think in the interest of keeping covenant, in the interest of legacy, in the interest of recognizing that our retired clergy do have some issues facing them, that it would behoove this council to spend a little bit of time as a whole wrestling with some of the pension issues that have been brought before the court. And I know the General Counsel Executive would faithfully probably deal with this, but I think we should all spend some time in conversation about what's happening with retired clergy and their pensions. I don't have a seconder, but hopefully somebody from Hamilton Conference will back me up.
Is there somebody to second that motion? Same Penny again? Sorry, saw Penny first. She had her hand right up, and we have her name in the list already, so thanks. All right, you've got the motion before you. Is there anything that you'd like to discuss, or are you ready to vote? I don't see anybody at a microphone, so I'm going to call the question. If you want to remove it, press 1. If you want to leave it in the docket, press 2 now. Okay, that is defeated. Friends, we have before us it's GS4301? GC4301, non-prioritized proposals, unamended, unaltered, all bits in. I'm not seeing anybody at a microphone, so I'm calling the question. Please get those clickers out. This time you are voting for or against GC for in favor or opposed to GC 4301 non-prioritized proposals. Please vote now. And that is approved. Folks, I think what just happened here was incredibly healthy. I really do. I think it's wonderful. It shows the passion that we have for the work that has been brought to this council and the desire to see everything get before us and get discussed and get wrestled with by the church, and that is incredibly healthy. And also a recognition that to do that well, we have a limited capacity to do that well with a huge number of proposals. And so we're trying out a new business model, and it means that some things are going to not get the attention by this court, and they'll be dealt with by the GCE that maybe otherwise would have been dealt with, but the things that we do deal with are going to get a fuller, richer discussion in the hopes that the decisions we come to will be a fuller and richer and more faithful decision. And boy, that's a balancing act. And you just wrestled with that balance, and that is awesome. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to move us on. And I'm going to ask the chair of the nominations committee, Graham Brownmiller, to come on up and introduce our next motion.
Moderator, General Secretary, fellow commissioners, visitors, friends, my name is Graham Brownmiller, and for the past 6 years I have served on the General Council Executive, and through it on its nominations committee, the past 3 years as its chair. At the September 2017 special meeting of the General Council 42, or recall meeting, there was a mandate given to the nominations committee to bring to this 43rd General Council recommendations for 15 members to serve along with the moderator, past moderator, and General Secretary as the executive of the General Council from January 1st, 2019 until the next executive is installed by the 44th General Council. The Nominations Committee was given some guidelines by which to do our work, which included requesting a representative be chosen by the Aboriginal Ministries Council, requesting each conference to recommend 3 to 5 people for consideration, and taking into account specific competencies and our vision for ourselves as a church. On behalf of the nominating committee, which consists of 1 member of the executive from each of the conference and 1 of the French ministry's representatives, I offer this recommendation today. Before I do, however, I want to comment on the work of arriving at these recommendations. I must start with thanks to each of the conferences for sharing in the discernment of which you have seen the final recommendation. It is a shared discernment for the conferences having brought forward the names from which the nominations committee were able to discern. Thank you. I also want to thank the 43 individuals who expressed interest in serving in this way, and for those with whom they discerned. Without the rich pool of skilled and faithful church members that we began our conversations with, we could not have come up with this recommendation, which we believe will serve the church faithfully. And I would like to thank the members of the nominating committee who shared their wisdom, insight, and prayerful discernment in coming to these recommendations. This proposal recommends an executive that is made up of members committed to serving on behalf of the whole church. The competencies requested by the 42nd General Council are included: theology, governance, finance, vision, reflecting the diversity of an intercultural church, lay ministry personnel, and geography. Recognizing that no group of 18 people can completely reflect the full diversity of the church, the nominations committee did pay attention to those who have been historically marginalized in the church. We are bringing 15 people who bring excellent skills and a breadth of connection across the church, and as we heard from the General Secretary earlier, it does not preclude the possibilities of corresponding members or other means by which the executive may maintain connection with all regions. We believe that these whom we are recommending will provide complement and balance to each other. Collectively, they bring a wealth of experience in all areas of expertise and knowledge that we were asked to consider. We believe we are recommending a well-rounded, fully capable group to guide the United Church of Canada into the beginning of this next chapter. Moderator, I would like to move nomination 01 as presented, and it is seconded by Nora Sanders.
Thank you very much. So friends, you have the motion with the names that are being put forward. There they are. This is moved by Graham Brownmiller and seconded by Nora Sanders. I see somebody at microphone 4.
Sue Broderick, Alberta Northwest Conference. I'm totally in support of the nominations as presented, but I would like to make a note to go into the proceedings that as we move forward in our new structure, that we try and work towards a balance of order and lay on the executive. As you note, on this executive, there are only 4 lay. I did talk to Graham and understood the reason why, and that there weren't that many applications from lay people to be considered, but it's a way of our church moving forward. We have worked very diligently to have a balance, and so I would like to make sure that going forward, as some of the terms end, that we try and get back to a balance of order and lay.
Okay, thank you. And microphone 4.
Gordon Roberts, Manitou Conference. Does adoption of this motion preclude the action being requested in Manitou proposal, I think it's number 3, regarding the membership of the executive?
No, that would be a separate proposal that will be dealt with later in the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Murray Spear, Alberta Northwest. I'm conscious of at least one region that is not represented, reflecting part of our earlier conversation, and I would make a suggestion to the nominating committee and request that it be entered into the record as a possibility, that consideration to those regions be given when populating other significant denominational boards and councils.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you for those comments. I'm not seeing anybody else at the mic, so I'm going to call for the question, unless you are running to a mic. Microphone 4.
Jason O'Hearn, Maritime Conference. Just quickly reading through the proposal and everything, trying to read all through the proposals. Just wondering, how well is there a youth representation to the GCE? Is there one directly, or will there be works with regional councils, youth and young adult ministers, or is there a direct youth advisor to the general council executive?
Can we have Graham's mic, please?
Moderator, there are 2 of these 15 names being brought forward before you that are under the age of 30, which falls within the United Nations identification of young adults.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Cathy Hamilton, Synode Montréal et Ottawa. Je veux vous inviter, si vous pensez qu'il faut avoir quelque chose d'autre, de vous présenter. It's very hard to choose from a pool of people if there are no candidates from that category. So if you are a layperson and you're feeling inspired, it would be great to put your name up for one of the positions in the church. If you're a woman, if you're whatever category you feel is missing, here's your chance.
And microphone 1.
George Megason from Conference of Manitoba and Northwestern Ontario. I have a question of clarification for the voting process. I've been noticing votes going up before the blue squares, and to my understanding, those votes aren't counted, right? They are counted? Okay, thank you.
And microphone 1.
Matthew Lindsay, London Conference. Just a question of clarification in regards to a statement made about how we have 2 of the elected officials to that be under the age of 30, which falls under that category. But however, I have a question of, is there anybody on that committee that is directly responsible for overseeing and giving suggestions from a wider youth community?
From the youth and young adult community, you're saying accountable to, like representing?
Yes.
No. Okay. The General Council Executive, and this is part of the decision that was made as we go to a smaller executive, is that at that size, it's absolutely impossible to have representation from every group within the church on an executive of 18 people, really even on an executive significantly larger than that. So there's an attempt made to represent the diversity of the church, but also knowing that other voices can speak to and be called in by the executive to give advice around issues.
Yes, and I think part of the thinking that came from the comprehensive review work as well was that somebody young shouldn't just be able to speak about young people's issues, but their views are important on everything. A person, a racialized person, shouldn't just be able to speak for that community, but should be able to speak on everything. So it's a two-way street, a new way of trying something.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello? Seeing nobody else at a microphone, then I'm going to call the question. So you have before you the report and the motion from the nominations committee that the names that are listed there be the names for the General Council Executive 40, General Council or Denominational Council Executive 43. Get your clickers out. And vote. And that is approved. All right, friends, we have one very exciting and important piece of business to do before we have our supper tonight. We have 10 nominees for the position of the 43rd Moderator of the United Church. Those nominees are Susan Beaver, Tessa Blakey Whitecloud, Richard Bott, David Hart, Kathy Larman, Catherine Faith McLean, Colin Phillips, Wanda Stride, Martha Turkile, and Donna Lee Williams. And we are going to have a chance for you right now to see them, to meet them, and for us to offer them a stole that they will then wear for the rest of General Council. And that's how you will know that they are a nominee. So that might give you an opportunity to single them out and have some conversation with them, get to know them a little bit, because on Thursday we're going to be voting for our new moderator. So Nora's going to call them each up, and I need the General Secretary and Speaker, Bay of Quinte and ANCC.
I'm going to call the names, and as people come up, the moderator will greet them, and they'll be presented with their stole. And from that stole, you can recognize who they all are this week. These beautiful stoles that we're about to see were designed by Evan, sewn by Jess, and a wonderful gift to this process. We're going to proceed in alphabetical order, so Susan Beaver, I invite you to come to the stage, please. Tessa Blakey Whitecloud. Richard Bott. David Hart. Kathy Laramond. Catherine Faith McLean. Colin Phillips. Wanda Stride. Martha Turkile. And Donna Lee Williams. Here goes. When they have dinner together tonight, we're going to be drawing the names of their speaking order. And so tomorrow you'll hear from them all. We don't know yet in what order. Here are your nominees. Go off the same way. Thank you, nominees. And everybody, take your opportunity to get to know them all this week. One of them will be our moderator. All of them are wonderful leaders in our church, and we're so grateful that they've come forward in this way. Thank you.
So before I invite our worship team to lead us in our before supper worship and grace, I just want to take an opportunity very briefly to let you know what's happening this evening and tomorrow morning. After supper, we're coming back into this space, and members of the Indigenous Church will help us to reflect on how we can live out the vision of reconciliation that we adopted in the calls to the church. Breakfast tomorrow starts at 7. Make sure you've had it before 8:30, because we're starting here at 8:30 with worship. And then we will go into, then we're going to hear, well, there's a bunch of stuff's going to happen, but the main thing is that we're going to hear from half of those nominees in the morning, and then we'll hear from the other half later in the day. So you don't want to miss tomorrow morning, and you don't want to miss tonight, and it's all happening here. So now our worship team are going to lead us in worship and grace.
I know. Oh, that's what happens when you project and then the mic comes on. Good evening. How are y'all doing? It's going good? Good. So I know you can all hear me okay. My name is Nikki Andre, and I do this thing called an a cappella jam. And we thought it would be a good way to embody some of the intentions that we're hoping to practice over the next week. So let's switch things up again. If you are a member of the youth delegation or one of the youth leaders, please raise your hands. Okay, great. Hey, we're going to kick things off with you. So please rise as you are able, tuck in your chair, and quickly find your way to the main stage, this clear space here behind me. All right. Now, while the youth are finding their way to the main stage behind me, I'm going to call out a series of table numbers. So up there on the stage, thank you. If I call out your table number, please raise your hand and keep it raised for me, please, till I get through all the numbers and take a look at you. Table number 62. There we are. Table number 63. Table 4. Table 5. Table 6. Table 41. Table 5. Table 3. Table 2. Table 8. Table 9, table 12, keep your hands raised. 13, 17, 18, 21, 22, 25, 27, lots of you, 28, 31, 32, 35, 36, 39, 49, 50, 54, 55, 58, 59, have I got you all? I have. Please rise as you are able. Tuck in your chair. Join me all around the stage here, anywhere you can. Fill in all the gaps for me, please. If it's not easy for you to move, feel free to stay seated. We're not going to leave you lonely. Okay. So while the rest of you are getting into a position, the youth are going to help me start this off with a little walking music. Call and response. Call. Response. Like this. Do, do, 2, 3, 4. Do, do. 3, 4, do, do. Do, do. Do, do. You got it. And step, step, step. Keep singing. Do, do. I talk, you keep singing. Do, step, 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 step. Everybody that's still seated, if you would rise, tuck in your chairs. Do, do. Join in. Do, do. Here we go. Everybody keep singing. Gonna teach these lovely people the next part. Change is coming. Change is coming. Change is coming. Change is coming. So what you gonna do? 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 I don't think you're all singing. There's like 500 people in this room. Come on now. In the bleachers, I can't hear you. Stronger together, can you show me how? 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 In the bleachers, can you join the youth? Sing it. Stronger together, can you show me how? 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 Shout it. Stronger together, can you show me how? 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 We are in this together. Though we bicker on Facebook in our curated streams, divided, we are falling. At a time when humankind faces existential crisis on seemingly every front, social structures crumbling, economies strangling, violence rising, governments shutting out and down, environmental fever rising. The health of Earth's inhabitants in decline, poisoned air, food, and water. We are in this together. For just as the body is one and has many members, so it is with Christ. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the hand to the feet. If one member suffers, all suffer together. And if one member is honored, all rejoice. We know this, and it makes us very uncomfortable. We talk a lot in gatherings like these about sitting with the discomfort. But what is it that makes us so uncomfortable in moments of pushback and courageous conversation. My friend Scott Richmond has an interesting take on this. He argues that the real discomfort is with our dependence on each other, on those with which we disagree and those we do not understand. Ubuntu is a Zulu word which roughly translated means human kindness or humanity towards others. Reverend Fulgence Nundaji Jamana translates the word this way: I am because you are. We are in this together. I would offer that as people of faith, we are charged not only to sit with the discomfort, but to bear it, like labor pains when water breaks. Let love flow. Let love's river through. Let love's river move. Be moved. And in your own time, look to someone you do not know. Clasp hands as you are comfortable, and take a moment to really meet them with all your senses. Touch, see, hear. Do that now. Someone you do not know. Feel. Hold their hands for a moment. I want you to feel their river running through your veins. Clasp their hand. Really feel their river running through your veins. Feel your river running through their veins. And as you hold each other's gaze, greet each other this way: we are one body. We are in this together. I am because you are. Ubuntu. And as you pray, move your feet. Have a great dinner.
You're welcome.